Recker, my brother, what's going on?
Nick, my man, did you shave again? You look good. You actually look good.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm still recovering from your visit with me a couple weeks ago. That's not good for my health, you
I'm
visiting.
not good for your health. That's
No.
it was a good trip. It was a good trip. Took many ideas, many impressions with me.
Before you came to visit me, we saw each other in Copenhagen for AOM, and we ran into a couple of our friends. We were trying to get them to talk to us then, but
Yes.
Angelo and Paavo, welcome.
Hello,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
thank you so much. So I'm a big fan of the show, so humbled and honored to join.
Oh,
Thank you. Well, the
humbled.
reality is this. We wanted to get you on the show, but you guys were too busy to
Yeah.
go to two mediocre podcast hosts during AOM. So that's a reality.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we could have taken you out to this back alley, Copenhagen Business School, where there was this studio, and done the podcast there. But we ended up doing it without you. But we got you on now a month later, and one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you guys is you have this cool paper that you came out and you were thinking about AI.
Well, I think what you've done is you responded to my call over the last couple of years where I said, like, where are the people that theorize about AI, seriously? And out comes this paper. And when I saw it, it's forthcoming in JMS. We'll put a link up, of course. You've done exactly that. You've done a very thorough review and discussion of what makes AI different or not, as it may be, right? So, and that's I think we can start with this. Maybe tell us a little bit about that paper. How did that come to be?
Yeah, maybe I can start. So uh I'm a management scholar and I was thinking and being a little bit frustrated that how do we actually think and theorize AI for real? Because a lot of stuff, which is a well-known critique, and you guys have done it quite well as well, that a lot of people talk about technology without really understanding the technology. What does it do? And I think AI right now is one of those technologies that we just throw out the name AI, or we say digital technology, and then we stay a little bit on the surface level. And then we started to really think that, oh, okay, so how do people actually think and theorize about AI? And we started to realize that, well, it's since the 50s, there was this excitement that we are building systems and machines that imitate, replicate, or perhaps surpass human intelligence. And then people got really excited about that. And then it led to very interesting, I would say, expectations towards AI. These expectations are in the popular culture, they are in the movies, and they are now inside our theories. So this
Hmm.
really, triggered our imagination too. And then we started digging further.
Well, and this is the deal. When you use, I always tell whatever executives or anything that when someone uses AI, if it's a technical person that knows what they're talking about and they use the term AI, they're doing it because they want something from you. Because the only reason you would use, if you know anything about the technology, you would not use the term AI. You would use an LLM or you would use whatever it is you're doing, computer vision. Uh, the reason you would use AI is because you're talking to a muggle. You're talking to someone who doesn't know anything about technology, and you want them to think you're going to do something fancy right now, right? And I think a lot of management, and even our Recker in our paper, we kind of screwed up here a little bit too, because we said, what's different about AI? This is back a few years ago when we wrote our Managing AI special issue. And we're like, well, it can learn, it can be autonomous, it can be more inscrutable. We came up with these three characteristics of it. But the fact is, maybe not, right? First of all, a lot of technologies can be inscrutable. It depends on whatever. A lot of technologies can act autonomously, right? A lot of them can learn more, maybe not automatically, but even all AI doesn't learn automatically, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of kind of the fun, it doesn't apply to all technologies. All technology, each technology is different. What I like about this paper is that they're like, okay, well, let's not talk about AI as this big thing. Let's look at different aspects of what it's doing in the world, right? Are we talking about the rationality? And if we are, then there are a couple of different, the objectivity, computational superiority, right? You have these ideas, and it's like, let's not talk about this black boxed, vague technology. It's changing every year. Let's get at what it is we're interested in. Are we interested in computational superiority? Okay, let's theorize computational superiority. Let's figure out what it means in this particular context, and let's do something, right?
Yeah, and I find what you say, Nick, very interesting in many ways. Like, not all emerging digital technologies that can learn autonomously, perform work, things that have been associated with humans, need to be called AI. And that's one of the clean messages that we have in this paper. We're kind of highlighting that what is actually important is actually think about what those technologies actually do and then take another metaphor perhaps. So one of the really cool things that the paper does is actually what is not explicitly stated. So we're calling for new metaphors that might actually give justice to certain elements that perhaps the idea of calling emerging digital technologies AI do not give justice to. So you can think
All right,
about
let's
physical
back this up
intelligence.
because you have this idea of a root metaphor, and we'll talk about that. But first, Recker, I have to tell you why I call Angelo and not Angelos. Because these
So
Greeks,
everyone wants to know that, Nick. It's a really important part. You didn't just stop. It's a really good argument
Not again.
for this bullshit now.
because Angelos is what he's got an S on his name, and all these Greeks, Panos and Manos and whatever, they all have an S on the end of their name. But then when they talk to each other, they don't pronounce the S. They just look at him. They go, Angelo. It's like, wait a second. And then, but sometimes they pronounce the S, sometimes they don't. So I just decided I'm not even pronouncing the S ever.
That's correct.
That's wonderful. So thanks so much for this enlightening moment here of your.
All right, now back to root metaphor. First of all, artificial intelligence is kind of a metaphor in itself. So it's not like it's a phenomenon. The phenomenon is computing, and it's 50, 70 years of computing, right? And then we use the metaphor, I guess. Is it a metaphor of artificial intelligence? I mean, is artificial intelligence, is it a metaphor?
Yeah, I can start, and this is a little brave before the Greek to talk about the metaphor, but let me try, and Angelos can then refute me. But yeah, so metaphor as sort of a concept that triggers our imagination and creates further ideas. And the idea of a root metaphor, this comes from the Mats Alvesson, the Problematizing review, which is our method. So the root metaphor would be something that is initiating and backing a bigger school of thought or research program. And artificial intelligence, it's one of these things that also, I guess, Alvesson, maybe me also, we would call it a hembig, hegemonos big construct, which is ambiguous. So
Yeah,
metaphor.
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Hegemonous big construct. Is that what he calls them?
Hegemonos big ambiguous construct, which
Ambiguous
is hembig.
construct.
So,
It is.
yeah,
But there's
it
a
is.
certain power to that ambiguity, isn't there? Artificial intelligence. It's like there's something evocative
It
about
is.
that, right?
It is. There, it's artificial, so it's something that is non-human, and there is something to do with intelligence, which is fundamentally a human feature. So of course this triggers everybody's imagination, and it's been triggering like 100 years already, not
So
180.
I have two questions about this. One is a comment, one is a question about this, because I like it as well. The one aspect that I find really interesting is this root metaphor is basically it's based on an inverse, right? This whole notion of artificial as some sort of non-human or anti-human, right? It's not just a metaphor. We're not saying it's a flower. We're saying it's the opposite of a flower, right? So we're not right. So there's the reference to human, but as I said, in an inverse. I think that's a fascinating element, because it applies both to the intelligence, to rationality, and to the human likeness, this anthropomorphic aspect to it all. And the second aspect, and here I want to push you a little bit, is I think that root metaphor is not just that it gives rise to this research program. If you look at the history of AI, this root metaphor, the very definition of where that came from, this has created path dependencies. Very much so. We are, to this day, we are building AI computing technologies to act like a human. We want them to be anthropomorphic, and we want them to exhibit a form of intelligence that is like humans, right? Not necessarily better, right? So, for example, you mentioned this surpassing intelligence. Well, most of the time, we're actually not even trying that, right? So I find it interesting, this root metaphor from the perspective of the path dependencies and therefore the missed opportunities that it also entails.
So, Recker, real quick, this idea of a root metaphor is different than a metaphor. A root metaphor came from a guy named Pepper, 1942. He had this book on the world hypothesis. I wrote a paper on root metaphors, by the way, at one point a few years ago. And it's like, you use things we're familiar with, and then we use that thing we're familiar with to make sense of something else, right? So,
Sure.
for example, we use the root metaphor of war for strategy, for example. We're going to defeat that. Uh, the root metaphor, I guess, that artificial intelligence invokes is that Ultron in the Avengers or something, right? We have this futuristic idea of these thinking robots. And it's almost like that is the metaphor we're using. That's what Elon Musk uses when they create the robots. That's what we're all thinking when we think of AI. We think of some future non-existent situation to make sense of existing. Is that what you're kind of pointing to, Recker?
The point that I was making is I think there is a very strong connection between the use of a root metaphor to path dependencies as we're
Yeah.
stepping into the future, into that image that we associated with this. So if I think of strategy as war, I am literally taking different steps, either because I want to prevent a war or, win the war or whatever. So, for prevention and winning would be two aspects I associate with that, not other ones. Maybe not negotiation, right? So I don't know, right? So I have a very different view of steps I need to take. And I think we see that in AI. And I find that interesting because I think that's an aspect that you don't bring out in that paper very much, that we have anthropomorphic AI, very much so, because that's how we defined it in the beginning, right? We think of these robots like the Ultrons, and hence we've built them this way, right? If we thought of them as, I don't know, organic matter or, like, I don't know, fruits or planets or
Biology.
biology,
Like
we would
biology.
have probably, we would have systems that look very different now. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I would say you captured perfectly, what we mean about root metaphor. So, maybe I raise kind of two examples. So, a paper by Brynjolfsson and others in a economics journal this year, they're saying that AI is an umbrella term that refers to computer system that is able to sense, reason, and act like a human. So your Ultron ambition is there. Then we have Sam Altman, who is probably the most powerful industry guy in AI at the moment. He's expecting that this is from his interview last year, actually. So AGI, artificial general intelligence, is coming in 25. So this is this year. Maybe it comes a bit later. We have a couple of months left. 25 machines will be able to think like humans when it happens. So it's very paradoxical, this metaphor, because you have this machine and you have this intuition and inspiration to do something like human, and then it's filled with these contradictions that, okay, we would also like to use computers and AI to things that humans don't do and do better. But then we have this other excitement that, oh, whenever machines can do something that appears like humans, we call it AI, and it's always the newest AI. So it's riddled with these paradoxes. It's super fascinating when you go into it.
Yeah, so your formula. So think of what you just said. Both of those definitions, Brynjolfsson and Altman, were about approximating human performance.
Oh yeah.
But you also point out in your paper, well, it's not just approximating human performance, but it's objective. There are certain things it's better than humans.
Yes.
It's better than humans in its computational power. These things can do things no singular human can, and they can be more objective than a human, theoretically, conceivably, right? I'm not sure about that because our humans just kind of trained on the data that we're trained on, therefore subjective based on our experiences and the data we're trained on. Similarly, these tools can only infer from what they were trained on, which means that they're subjective in a sense. So we have to talk. So the objectivity, I think, is tougher, but I think no one's going to argue with computational superiority. And that's like, okay, does it think like a human or does it actually think better than a human because it's strong? And then similarly with anthropomorphism, that's acting, isn't it? Acting like a human. And there are two aspects to it. One is, do they appear to be as if they were human? The other is, do they do they actually have agency, right? So I think that's a good formulation. I think it's much more sophisticated than some of these pat answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the one thing, since you talked about this anthropomorphism and agency, what I really liked is that distinction that you draw between autonomy and intention. And I thought that, whoa, okay, right? So because we talk about autonomy as well, but intention is some sort of goal orientation, right? And you basically, I think at some stage you made the argument, well, it could be autonomous, but it's not really intentional, right? Like take ChatGPT, it does stuff, but only if I tell him, why, like to do it and for what purpose and so forth. And if I give it a different goal, a different intention, it does something differently. And I think that's a really nice way of adding more nuance, right? Going back to this, what Paavo called the black boxing or the shallowness sometimes when we think about these stuff that we add the nuance where it's required, that we go back and say like, well, let's look at agency, but let's go deeper and think about, all right, capacity to act, intention to act, autonomy to act. Like in humans, these three things are not unequivocal. I have the best intentions, but I'm not doing it. I could do it, but I don't. I do it for the wrong reasons. And the same thing we can apply also to algorithmic agents, to AI. You're all nodding, so that's it.
Yeah. All right. I was going to say that if you go back to Russell and Norvig, their early, I don't know if you guys remember their table. I think it's in their first chapter where they kind of had acting human, thinking human, and then thinking rationally and acting rationally.
Yeah.
I kind of translated that to, so it fits your ideas about acting and thinking as well. It's a little different, but yeah, I don't know. But I think that's what we have to do is when we conceive of AI in an organization, we don't just call it AI ever from now on, right? Nick's rule. Since I made a rule last time, I'm making a rule this time. If you're writing a management paper on AI, you're not allowed to talk about AI in some general sense. You have to pick the thing. You have to at least conceptualize it around its computational power, around its actorhood or agent. Like, what is it it's actually doing in this context? And then do your study, right?
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah.
And I think, when it comes to like using the term AI, like what does it really like give you to your study? Like what kind of assumptions does it allow you to unpack? And I think this is one of the key points we're making. Like, instead of actually drawing on inspirations of computer scientists, economists, and go into this idea of like mimicking human behavior, surpassing human actions, and so on, I think it's way more important to think of other metaphors. Like when we talk about AI companions, for instance, right? I mean, why do we use the AI in front of companions? We can talk about artificial companions and then highlight other aspects of those emerging digital technologies that need to be studied in order to understand better how companionship, caregiving, and so on are fundamentally reshaped when emerging digital technologies are involved. The same goes with like physical intelligence. Like we have so many of those robots or physical machines that do act and autonomously. They are able to learn. However, this kind of physicality, the embodiment, other aspects need to be way more like pronounced, kind of emphasized. And I think having this new metaphor idea, you can talk more about physical intelligence or talk about robots and so on and so forth. And we can go on with the new ideas like stochastic technologies and so on. So the idea of not using AI is very important, but I think let's talk about emerging digital technologies which are data intensive, and then think of metaphors that allow us to unpack ways and assumptions that need to be studied. The last one I want to say is like when we talk about AI, we talk about one single entity. What about these kind of interconnected systems we see in the real world, in the wild? I mean, if I take the dairy farm project we have in California, like we're looking into like robots, sensors, different technologies, cows, data, and some of those systems are able to learn and they are able to kind of act autonomously, but some of them not. But the interconnections between them are interesting. So what we ended up doing in that project, in some of the papers, we talk about predictive automation systems to highlight the physicality, highlight the embodiment, as well as these kind of interconnected subsystems within the ecosystem.
I'm glad that you bring that up, Angelo, because one question that I had while I was reading the article is that it seems to be focused on, these current AI algorithm form, like a HHGPT, like a program, one app that I'm using. And I wonder to what extent these metaphors or these root assumptions of rationality and anthropomorphism even help us in a world where we have more and more connected agents. When I talk to ChatGPT and it talks to that thing and that thing, and somewhere over there a light goes on. You know what I mean? Like when I have entire connected ecologies of agents, and then is that even still helpful to think about whether or not they're more or less anthropomorphic? Because they're not, right? They're really not. They're ecologies of algorithms that with interfaces to talk to one another. And rationality again doesn't seem so salient there, right? It seems more like does it do the things that it does? Like is the automation chain effective in a way, right? So I was wondering, and you kind of make that point here, whether moving forward towards agentic AI, we can get rid of both of these metaphors and move towards different ones and what they might be.
I think that's a very very interesting observation. I would sort of both agree and disagree. So in a way, what AI and algorithms, what they do with data, all these expectations of, whether the data helps them to do something that is rational or effective within some function objective. All of this will remain. I would say so, and also our expectations about agency and autonomy and all those. These might be. I think there will be more complexities. As Angelos says, we need probably more concepts and metaphors. But I think the Nick's first rule of not just saying agentic system, right? But really unpacking what we expect this system to do. What does it accomplish? And we sort of I think we will continue to mystify AI a little bit because we say that it does something, and there's an ecology of agents doing something. That's another metaphor, right? So we expect this ecology to do something. In a way, we still designed it, and we are observing what it does, and so on. So I think returning back to these assumptions, it will be helpful in the future as well. But I think it's certainly gonna be more complex and I would say also more interesting.
All right, so we're talking a lot about root metaphors, right? And metaphors and how, and Angelo, a couple times you've said we need a new one. So you have to be thinking about new ones. I thought of beehive as an alternative to Ultron, right? If Ultron is our current metaphor that we all kind of think of when we think of AI, a beehive is maybe an alternative.
Or a swarm, right? Like a swarm,
Yeah.
a
Well,
school of
that's
fish.
where yeah. So what are other metaphors that I guess you mentioned, Paavo, just now, an ecology or something. So if we think of natural ecosystems or something instead of what else? What other root metaphors have you, sausage making machine? Uh, right.
I mean, like I think one prevalent, if I interpret what Paavo said, is this notion of an agent. We think of them as agents, maybe single agents, maybe agents that are actually themselves connected of multiple agents. But anyway, it's always this. Here's a person that can act on my behalf. That still comes with this. It's sort of like, hey, if I have an agentic AI system, I never have to switch on the light. I
Oh,
just
again, your entitative thing,
yeah, I know,
Recker.
right? But
It's
no,
an
I'm not saying
entity.
that I'm doing this, but I think this is an continue to carry forward, even now that we move into the, from AI to AI agents and so forth, and even to the ecologies, we are still thinking them as some sort of surrogate, as an agent, meaning some entity that acts on my behalf and does something ideally for me or for others and so forth, right? A doing thing.
Yeah, that's this the new metaphor of agent and agency. This has started a new line of thinking, as Jan said, and I think the discussion is moving into that direction. And I had this short piece with a colleague on how could we use the principal agent theory also to understand agency that we attribute to AI now. So it opens up a new line of expectations also. And again, some of them I think are more or less problematic and some of them are quite helpful. And it challenges our thinking about, are we really, like in the principal agent, are we really delegating agency truly to a software or not? And is it different or similar? And it's gonna be somewhat similar, somewhat different. But yeah, I'm handing over to you, Angelos. I cut you off.
Yeah, no, great. No, yeah, and I just want to add on that. Like one of the frustrations we had early on was precisely that entity-based view, this kind of substantive understanding that, these kind of technologies have something on themselves that they can act as if they were humans. And I think we need to move more towards this idea of what do they mean for the ways we relate to one another? What kind of, like, how do they relate to one another in an ecosystem of agents, if we call them agents. So I think we need to move beyond this entity-based focus and consider a bit more how they are implicated within organizations and in the relations that we have among one another.
Yeah. All right. So, and Angelo, are you still a postdoc?
I'm an assistant professor at the Umeå University in Sweden, and now the last 2-3 years postdoc at Stanford, working with Pam Heinz.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I guess if you're going back to Umeå when you're done, or if you're going to look for, I think, I don't know, what's it like? So you're in Sweden, and then Paavo, you're in Finland.
Yes.
And actually, Paavo, last time I was in Finland, I was in a sauna with Robin Gustafsson, and after a few hours of being there, it was kind of wild. Right, you go from I don't know, getting off to being in a sauna in the woods, and then we jumped in the freezing cold water. Are you Finnish, Paavo?
Yes, I'm Finnish, and I also know Robin, so
Yeah.
interesting
It's
to hear.
a weird situation for those of us who are not familiar with this, to take off all our clothes and get into a sauna with another person that we don't know very well. But you Finnish people have no problem doing this sort of thing.
Yeah, we, oftentimes, especially for our American colleagues, this situation has come a little bit as a surprise.
Yeah.
So I'm
So
quite
here,
comfortable with that too. Is a Northern European, no problem.
but here we have, Finland, we have Sweden. There's a particular Scandinavian, I don't know, now, Angelo, although you're Greek, you were trained, right, with Johnny Holmstrom and up there.
And Maria Bengtsson in my PhD, yeah.
Yeah, so is there something about because I know the Scandinavian tradition, I know in institutional theory, they actually call it the Scandinavian institutionalism. I know in information systems development, there's a Scandinavian perspective on institutional development. And I realize, and is there something about Nordic or something about that area that you take this critical posture of things and pick them apart? And is that part of, I guess, your perspective coming to this, or am I imagining? Because I think Alexei, he's Finnish as well, isn't he? And he's on this page. And then, yeah.
Yeah, so there is this in at least in the field of management, we tend to think a lot about relations and relationships, whether it's between organizations or individuals. So we tend to go deep and think about how things happen in a context. So, also in our paper, it's very much about, what's the organizational context, and, these things are not isolated. So therein I find a linkage for sure for this type of work. It feels
When I think about the Scandinavian tradition, and I know Mats and Jorgen as well, he was a colleague at, Jorgen at least in Brisbane for a long time, and they're Scandinavian. So I would always associate some of the lines of scholarship with reflexivity and critical, right? So like I always think of the Scandinavians like they don't take certain assumptions for granted. You could say it bluntly, saying they want to cut through some of the bullshit they read, and that drives them, and then they do think and pause, right? If I think about Jorgen Sandberg, I mean, he has not only done this, he now has a more recent paper that thinks about research phenomena as being constructed, socially constructed, not just existent. They don't exist in the world. We make them up. Anyway, so, so he pauses, he reflects, he critically thinks about these assumptions. And that's a sort of a motto that I see with him in basically all of his work. And, you're building on this. I like it as well. And you're doing the same thing. You're just like, let's pause for a second and let's think about some of the notions we throw out about AI a little bit too quickly. And when we look closer, it's, all of that is more nuanced or more complicated or not as apparent as it may seem, right? So from a very high level, that's what your paper says. Let's be a little bit more reflexive, a little bit more critical, a little bit more precise, really.
Yeah, that's
and I think, as a Swedified as a Swedified Greek, I would say, and I love the idea of being a Swedified Greek in a way, because, what I believe the Scandinavian tradition has a lot in common, like the different schools of thought, is that it creates kind of spaces for care and for a particular pace that allows that kind of reflexivity to happen. Like when you're a PhD student or a postdoc, you are kind of you're invited to enter these kind of reflexivity spaces, like be critical, pause, don't take it fast, do slow research. And I think that is one unique characteristic that I love about Sweden in particular, and the rest of the Scandinavian countries as well.
When I think of the Scandinavian kind of perspective, so my favorite book ever from a Scandinavian, it's like a part of that Scandinavian institutionalist tradition, is this guy Niels Brunson. He wrote a book called The Organization of Hypocrisy. And I haven't read it in a number of years, but it's so cool. He basically says that, organizations, a decision that you make in the face of some situation is in itself the whole goal. It's not actually to enact whatever solution, it's to make a decision. So, for example, if there's a crisis, we have to make a decision that we're going to be whatever, environmentally friendly. Making of the decision is the goal. We decouple that from the actual implementation of it. No one cares if you implement it or not. This is in politics. This is an organization. So I think it's this idea of clever, but also, as you said, Paavo, the questioning of assumptions, this idea that the world takes it for face value, and then the Scandinavian tradition kind of looks underneath it. And that's the issue with AI. That's why I think your paper is kind of a Scandinavian tradition paper about AI. It's like there's this assumption, and the assumption is AI is actually a thing. You're like, wait a second, it's not a thing. We're this root metaphor that we're following, and then if you unpack it, it's really, we use it to try to get at some other things. And now let's focus on the other things. So, and by the way, if you want to look at information systems development, there's a paper in 1989 by Floyd et al. It's called Out of Scandinavia, Alternative Approaches to Software Design and System Development. It's really a cool paper in that it talks about how the world thinks about system development in one way. Scandinavia thinks about it in a different way, and it's all very participatory. It's about getting assumptions out, getting goals out, getting different groups to. So it's that, like Angelo said, the highly contextualized kind of social humanistic.
Well, what I like about this paper of yours is really that it's a little bit like Yannis's paper. It's actually jam packed with ideas. Sure, it has a big story about the root metaphors and the field assumptions, but there's many good ideas about it that we haven't even touched upon, right? So you highlighted at some point, for example, the critical role of data in all of this. Yeah, when you think about anthropomorphism, agency, autonomy, rationality, all of this hinges on data. Right, we haven't even touched upon this, right? So there are lots of little nuggets for students that want to get serious about AI. They can go deep with your paper, right? They can take one of the aspects and say, all right, let's talk about, I don't know, say intention versus autonomy, right? And just focus on this differentiation, right? I know it helps me in one of the papers that we're working on where we are basically doing the same thing. We're looking at development of AI as this big thing, and that's really weird and it's fuzzy. And it would make much more sense to pick one aspect. How did they build intentionality into the system? How did they build autonomy? What level of data in creating some form of rational or not rational, intelligence and so forth. So I think this is a wonderful stop, so the go-to place for people. I have two questions. One is very nasty, and what is just my curiosity. So as far as I know, this is part of that special issue on AI that Dom Chalmers and others have been running, and there's a couple of papers actually out by now. Talk about the backstory. Talk about the review process. Where did you get pushback?
Wait, is this your nasty question?
No, that's not the nasty question. That's gonna come in a second.
Okay. I can start with the backstory. So I already mentioned previously that we started with frustration, and it was our frustration about talk and theory of AI in management scholarship, because we saw those path dependencies and we saw that, okay, there are a lot of citations to computer science and economics, and it's a relatively simplistic picture of AI in organizational context, and we already covered this a little bit. So then what we found as a cure or as medicine to our frustration was the problematizing review method by Alvesson and Sandberg, Scandinavians,
Mhm.
they call for reflexivity indeed, and not accumulating by a review. So not just adding number and finding out that what's common in the literature, but all digging deep and decoupling those assumptions. So we went with this approach to this special issue, and the special issue invited talk about and theorizing on AI. How do we do it in organizational management? And then we saw a perfect fit. And also this problematizing review method paper was published in Journal Management Studies originally. So we saw, oh, that's a perfect fit. There are not many of such papers out there because that paper was published 2020 in JMS, the problematizing review, the method, they talk about that method. So we took that method and we found it very valuable. We sort of were starting with the more normal systematic review approach, but we started surfacing things that sounded a bit, boring and sort of surface level. So then we thought that we turn the approach, we take the problematizing approach, and we look at the top management journals and how AI is being theorized in those. And then this led to us decoupling and piecing out all of these assumptions and sharp edges. So then we sent the paper to JMS, and there were two types of pushback. Also in our friendly reviews, by the way. One pushback was that, why don't you go for IS and computer science and elsewhere? Why just organizational management? And then our response was that we want to look at the very top tier. So we look at AMJ and
Did you hear
SMJ.
that, Nick? Did you just hear what he said?
In other
Yeah.
words, IS is not really top tier. That's what we just heard.
that's
He's
also
a
very
management guy. He
no.
doesn't know.
No,
He doesn't know.
no. We wanted to focus on how the thought leader journals in OMT, especially, not excluding IS, on purpose. So we had to fight over it for multiple years in different discussions. But we wanted to see, because there is this tendency of these management journals to cite each other and build a cumulative pattern, and there are these bad dependencies. So we needed to put the boundaries somewhere. So what is the discussion in organ management theory mainstream journals? So we look at those mainstream journals. We had to defend this approach. This was one pushback, and the other pushback was that, okay, are you sort of strawmanning the other people's arguments? So are you, when you problematize, is it really a problem, or aren't the scholars actually working to resolve this problem? And then we had to work with ourselves also, that are we actually being just nasty and pointing out that other people are not, really understanding the artifact? They are just talking about AI and in a very surface level. And then we dig deep and we found that, yeah, people are actually working with different angles to this issue, and they are working to resolve the problem. And also our approach to problematizing review is not to say that other people are the problem and we're right. It's that the problem is that there is this path dependency that Jan mentioned, and we have carried it forward. And now we call to open it up for scrutiny and critical thinking, and we see that other people are doing that. So we needed to, we struggled with the tone and we struggled with the scope, and I think we sort of got it right in the end. I'm
Recker, I just checked. They did cite our paper.
Yeah, they did cite our paper,
But it's like stuck in
your
a
paper.
table or something. They didn't pay attention to
first
it.
of all,
I can reveal something from the review process because you asked. So I think we also got a pushback by citing your paper.
Why? What kind of
Just to let you
pushback?
know, why do you cite these IS papers if it's an OMP review? So then we also needed to fight to keep your paper involved, because we said that, well, yeah, but we want to talk broadly also and not just to focus on a couple of journals.
I just want to say that they did very quickly to say that they did an amazing job. The reviewers and the special issue editors, they were really great in actually providing very constructive feedback. And one of the things that they helped us a lot to do is actually do justice to like the different approaches that people had. Some of them were critical indeed towards anthropomorphism and rationality. And in the beginning, we didn't really make that point explicit. And I think it was very helpful throughout the rounds that the reviewer said, just be a bit nicer to your colleagues and actually highlight the papers that take a bit more of a critical stance. So this is what we did, and we avoided the extreme problematization.
That was very helpful actually, and we went a bit more humble and a bit more critical to ourselves as well, and this was a great outcome.
Well, to be honest, I don't think the tone is any problem, right? So I read through this without you saying that. I don't think it's overly critical or you're portraying anyone as doing bad research. I think it's really very much focused on the content and the assumptions and how we might think about them differently. So I think that's well done. My critical point is actually the same about your non attendance to research that would be published in IS journal. Now, you already made an argument. Frankly, I don't buy any of them. I don't think they're very good arguments. But let's broaden out this discussion. Like you're right. You basically didn't include IS journals or work in IS journals in your review. Fine. You have some arguments. I don't particularly buy them. But the broader issue is one that Nick and I discussed several times in this podcast over the years, which is why do we have this situation? Like, why are we not including them? What is IS doing wrong that they're not being considered, right? Angelo, you're an IS person. Paavo, you're not. You said you're a management scholar. For whatever that's worth. To me, these distinctions are the names of the doors, right? Our door signs that put us in some departments. They have very little to do with what we're studying. We're all studying AI, for example. And what does it matter in what journal they appear in, right? And how come then we have this beautiful paper and the one area, technology and management, that's sort of IS, we just disregard them.
I can't agree more. I think I agree 100%. And, these kind of distinctions should actually be a bit revisited, especially from younger colleagues. I think we could actually include more. But my question is, what is the purpose of the paper, right? So what kind of purpose does it try to serve? And the purpose that it's trying to serve is actually to be an invitation to scholars that are studying emerging digital technologies to revisit their assumptions, right? I could say that our own understanding of the literature, both IS and management studies, and I would actually not even think about the distinction myself, to be honest, is that they all followed more or less the same narrative of AI as the root metaphor, of anthropomorphism and rationality serving as the two key assumptions. And what our paper was actually intended to do is be an invitation to both streams of research, which I would consider is one stream of research myself, to actually revisit those assumptions and consider new metaphors. So we could easily have written the paper by focusing only on the IS literature, to be honest, and I'm kind of confident we would have the same kind of arguments laid out. So it was a matter, in my point of view at least, it was a matter of focusing on one stream of research and highlighting in depth the kind of path dependency that you highlighted earlier, rather than go and cover breadth in order to advance the argument. So I would say it was more like a depth, versus breadth argument.
Yeah. I mean, there's also always this pragmatic. You have to stop somewhere. You need to see some criteria to set the boundaries for your literature search. So I get that absolutely, and it makes sense. The other part of the reality is this paper, as it is, like literally word by word, you could publish it in any journal, including IS journal. I don't see anything that you would do differently.
If you published it in an IS journal, you'd need more IS papers.
Well, you would have different search criteria, but that's about it. I mean, the main point.
No, actually, all right. So if I was an editor getting this in an IS journal, I would have had them go, because there's a striking resemblance to the 2x2 that Russell and Norvig have, and that's computer science, but it is kind of the touchstone for AI. So I would have had these guys go back and be like, okay, look at Russell and Norvig's thinking and acting rationally and like a human, right? There's very much, and that's 1980, dudes, right? So this is my problem. With the thing that I'm taken aback by is that a management scholar would say, why are you citing IS? Did that really happen? Where they're like, why are you citing information systems?
Well, I think that comment came because I think it was partially our own making, because we said that, okay, we want to see that how scholars build arguments within this one silo. As Jan mentioned, we need to set the scope somewhere. So we actually followed 12 journal selection that is published oftentimes in academic management annals, and there we go. So we have those 12 journals, and then the problematizing review. The idea is to also to source from elsewhere, and then we cited computer science, and we have a lot of IS citations there, including your paper and many others. So we really struggled with this boundary. And then part of this struggle was that, okay, we had then reviewers say, well, fair enough, focus on more of the organizational journals then. Why do you do those citations? And then we did take a lot of stuff about Russell and Norvig out from the paper that was there in
Mhm.
the earlier versions. So it could turn out very different also this discussion. So
Wow.
it's a very, very generated paper, I have to say, and it also turned around in the process.
Yeah, because it's like computer science is the topic, and then information systems is a field that tries to pay attention to both the technical and the social. And then management generally black box is the technical. And that's okay because they have different emphases, they're different, right? But then if you're trying to open the black box of the technical, looking to more technical fields is kind of obvious, you
Yeah,
know?
I would say that's a very obvious direction. And then the other one, which is sort of complementary and which we do, is to open up these new, relatively in-depth organizational inquiries, like, what does rationality mean? What are the bounds of machine rationality in organizations? And all those are calls for further research. So they are quite organizational, but they are really informed by technology at the same time. So I think the whole topic is completely interdisciplinary.
Yeah, so Paavo, I know there's another area that's like this. So AI is one, and I know you like to publish around architectures and that sort of thing as well. And that's another area where, management and strategy scholars open the box a little and actually cite engineering and, around modularity and stuff like that. So I think in organizational scholarship, management scholarship, when you start getting into the more technical topics, going to reference fields and bringing that into is totally acceptable. That's why I'm really surprised. Now, it doesn't have to be, but I'm really surprised that people would push back on you and be like, "Oh, the technical fields don't apply here because we're management." That sounds to me like it's misguided. Yeah. Anyway,
I just want to
Angelo.
highlight one thing. Yeah, just about the way that we could have actually taken the paper if we were thinking more about the technical aspects. Like something I'm very intrigued by, and I think it's going to be very promising in the future. I'm planning actually to work on it. Is the AI evaluation? Like how do we evaluate AI systems? And I think our paper invites a different idea about AI evaluation, incorporate organizational concerns, not think only about technical aspects or accuracy metrics and so on, but think about how can we think about design evaluation and design evaluation metrics in ways that they capture relational effects, ongoing coordinations, like think about those more organizational concerns and incorporate them into AI evaluation models. So I think it would be interesting to go that direction and highlight not only how we can draw on more technical fields, but also how our paper is offering a new perspective on processes such as AI evaluation. Like, how can we evaluate AI models if we move beyond the idea of using AI as the root metaphor and highlighting rationality and anthropomorphism? It would be a completely different
Yeah.
schema of things for evaluating AI. So I really believe that we need to do way more on the intersection and think a bit more of what can we draw on from the technical fields and management studies, which I think we just need to think more of this mutual adjustment between the two rather than being obsessed about publishing in one or publishing in another and just having the silo thinking.
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, like in general, I mean, the beauty of your question, of your paper is that it asks so many questions that are worth thinking about, right? So it really can spawn a lot of research on very, very different type of, sort of problems. That's why, I mean, I sometimes feel the same way when I read some of Yanis Kaliniko's work, that he gives me, it's not just one paper that answers one question, it actually gives me 40 new questions. And I feel the same way here, and I like it very much. It's clearly a great paper. I was very happy to see it out. And
Yeah,
it's
see,
good that
this
we
is
have
what
it.
happens. This is what happens when Recker reads a paper. He gets all excited. Uh, if it's a good conceptual paper.
No, this is when I read your papers. Like when I read Nick's papers, I have zero questions in my head. They're just boring. They're just closed shops that are like, okay, it's
All
modulation.
right. Well, wait. I do. So wait. We discussed potential. I think we had the hive or swarm ecosystem. I actually have a paper forthcoming that Recker's not going to like on AI ecologies ecosystems. Um, what else? And then I thought of sausage making machine. Are there any other metaphors we can play around with other than Ultron? I mean, this is important.
I think we have one in mind. We're working on machinification, which actually sprung from this paper. So maybe Angelos can mention about it. It
Yeah,
came from
and
his
the
head at
the
some point.
the whole idea of machinification, and we can think of other metaphors as well that center on technologies like stochastic aspects and so on. But if we think about machinification, we are trying to actually work on it and highlight the new kind of minding the machine tasks that are created through engagements with emerging digital technologies, and how those are relatively different than the Tayloristic kind of narratives that we had in the past. So we're considering a lot like what happens to humans and their relations when they engage with those digital technologies in the organizational
So we
context.
turn humans into
Highlight
machines. Is that what you mean, like machinification?
It sounded
yes, yes.
the metaphor invoked in me the image of Charlie Chaplin, right? Is that what you mean?
Well, we have a
Exactly.
definition of it in the paper. I can read it. It's the tendency of machine agency to drive human action and tasks.
Huh.
So I think the Chaplin, picture is nice, but we have a modern version of it now with algorithmic management and algorithmic control.
And of
So,
course,
so
the novel Mind the Machines. I forgot who wrote it. Anyway, I'll put it up. That's also came to mind. It's
so the
powerful,
opposite,
right?
the opposite of
Mhm.
anthropomorphism is mechanomorphism. I don't know if you've seen that, but I think it's different than what you're talking about with machinification. I think you're machinificating the people, and I think there's a lot of cool old research on that, which
Oh yeah.
is kind of procedural rationality humans. But this mechanomorphism, I think, is interesting too, because the opposite of doing an anthropomorphic AI, like an agent, is to make a mechanomorphic AI. So it's make sure that you eliminate any human
Like,
characteristics.
yeah.
Like think of your Roomba, right? You'll let your Roomba go around in every room and look at you while you're getting out of the shower and everything because it looks like a machine. It doesn't have a little face on it. It's not cute. If you put a little face on it and it was cute, you wouldn't want it in your bedroom. So
Yeah, but my question is, Nick, like think about like your Roomba and you cleaning the floor, like you doing the work. Are you having the same expectations? Are you evaluating yourself in the ways that are inspired by how Roomba is actually cleaning the floor, right? So I think one aspect could be interesting here is like, do we start evaluating or seeing processes in ways that are actually we're inspired by how we evaluate AI models or other technologies in the workplace? And I think that is a bit of inspiration for us for the for the machinification kind of aspect. But I love your mechanomorphism idea. It's very Greek as well of you.
That's very Greek. Well, so two more metaphors that come to my mind. One is Greek mythology, right? Like gods, right? Or sort of deities, or everything that goes with that. That would be
casino or a blackjack table or something.
the other one that I've seen in a paper that didn't actually go anywhere, but that drew an analogy to the animal kingdom and specifically to dinosaurs, and sort of the evolution and sort of eventual demise of dinosaurs and carnivores and herbivores and all these sorts of things. It didn't quite work, to be honest, but that's what I've seen people do. They use that metaphor of T-Rex versus God knows Triceratops or whatever. Yeah. Anyway, so we'll see what the future holds with different metaphors, but it's great that your paper got us to thinking about it, I guess. It's great that you came on the show, that's for sure. We could go on for hours, I guess, but thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you very
guys.
much for the invite. Yeah, thank you.
you.
That was a great discussion as well, and we got a bit of inspiration for the future too.
Well, let us know what becomes of your future papers. We can discuss them as well.
All
Thank
right,
you.
everyone. See you next time.
See you next time, guys. Bye-bye.